The typewriter clicks. Each key strike a tiny percussion against the silence, a sound so sharp it fractures the frozen air. I adjust the collar of my wool coat, the scratch of it against my neck, a familiar grounding irritation. Outside the thick ice, encrusted window of the Blackwood Outpost S Archive Annex, the Dust Bowl drought bleeds into a perpetual, hollow twilight. No shadows cling to the snowdrifts piled against the walls. None. It's as if the light itself is bleached, leaving only a flat, gray, white void where darkness should be. My breath fogs the cold glass, but the fog doesn't cast a shadow on the frozen pane. I watch it dissipate, the absence more profound than any darkness. The fungal bloom on the walls, pale green, sickly veins of mold, seems to pulse faintly in the weak light, smelling of damp earth and decay. I catalogue another geological report, the paper brittle, the ink faded. Preliminary sediment analysis, Sector 7, 1934. Asterisk, my fingers move with practiced precision over the keys. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Asterisk, the rhythm is my shield, a mantra against the oppressive silent cold that sinks into my marrow. The air tastes metallic, the scent of old paper and frozen condensation thick on my tongue. Then, a misalignment. A report slides sideways on the desk, revealing the typed note beneath it. The cat watches. Asterisk, the words are stark, black on white, typed with the same precise clinical hand as the geological data. My pulse hammers against my ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the typewriter. Steady beat. A prank. Someone's idea of a joke. Asterisk, I force my fingers to continue the thumping click. Clack, now sounding ragged. I glance at the reflection in the frost. Rimed window, a pale face, wide eyes, the sterile light washing out all definition. But in the reflection just behind my shoulder a flicker, not my shadow, a shape, a cat. Its fur is the color of old bruises, and centered on its forehead, where a nose should be, burns a single unblinking eye. I jerk my head around, nothing, just the empty ice. Choked room. My breath catches. I turn back to the window, heart pounding. The reflection is gone, but the feeling remains, cold and sharp as the ice outside. The absence of my own shadow on the pane is no longer unsettling. It's a violation. I look down at my hands on the keys. For a split second I see it, a single, unbroken thread of crimson light, impossibly bright against the gray, extending from my wrist to the window. It vanishes as quickly as it appears. Fond hallucination, stress. The cold. Asterisk, I try to rationalize it, but the rationality feels thin paper, thin against the dread coiling in my gut. I pull the next report, seismic activity log, sub-level gamma. The paper stiff. The typewriter keys click with renewed urgency, a desperate attempt to impose order on the unraveling reality. Click, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Asterisk, the sound echoes too long in the empty room, the silence pressing in from all sides. I lean back, the chair's wooden legs scraping the frozen floor with a sound like fingernails on glass. My eyes dart to the window again. The reflection shows only the empty archive, the mold on the walls, the stark lines of the desk. But the feeling of being watched, of that single crimson thread, lingers. I reach for the carriage return lever. The fort we clack and plack is sharp final. It echoes, stretching unnaturally, bouncing off the ice walls, the sound seeming to linger in the air long after the lever has clicked back into place. The echo doesn't fade. It stretches the thin, high note hanging in the frozen air, impossibly long. Then, beneath the lingering echo, a new sound, a faint, dry cruncher. Like ice shifting under immense pressure, but not from outside. It comes from foam twit within, the thick, frozen wall beside the desk. The sound is precise, deliberate, and it stops. The brittle paper crackled under my fingers, another topographical survey of Sector 4. Dust migration patterns, July 1936. Asterisk, the ink bled slightly, a testament to the relentless dampness that permeated the Blackwood outpost. I categorized it, filed it, and reached for the next. It was a map meticulously drawn, but the details were unsettling, familiar to familiar. Then I saw it, tucked beneath a report on subterranean fungal growth, lay a dollhouse. It was perfect, an exact replica of a house I hadn't consciously thought of in decades. A house in Oklahoma, my childhood home. The chipped blue paint of the porch, the slightly crooked placement of the window boxes, the faded floral pattern of the curtains visible through the tiny windows, all rendered with an unsettling precision. Asterisk 1930s rural domestic, possible historical artifact. Asterisk I typed, the words feeling hollow even as they appeared on the page. The typewriter. As spell chimed, a sharp discordant note in the pervasive silence. It chimed once too many times, an anomaly. I noted it, filing it away with the other irregularities that seemed to accumulate with each passing day. The absence of shadows within the dollhouse. Windows was the first true disturbance. No dust motes danced in the miniature sunlight, no shadows clung to the tiny porch. Only a flat, unwavering light, like a photograph bleached of all depth. I leaned closer, the scent of old wood and something vaguely floral honeysuckle, perhaps. Wafted from the miniature structure. My breath fogged the air in front of my face, but the fog didn't darken the miniature windows. It simply disappeared. My pulse quickened, a subtle tremor beneath the surface of my methodical routine. I reached for a fresh report, Geological Survey, level Gamma, the paper rasping against the desk. Click, 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 clack, clack. Asterisk the typewriter keys offered a momentary solace. My fingers moved automatically, transcribing the data. The sediment composition. Mineral density asterisk. But my gaze kept returning to the dollhouse. The crimson thread appeared then, a flicker at the periphery of my vision. I blinked. It was there again. A single, unbroken strand of crimson light, extending from the dollhouse's front door, impossibly bright against the gray, bleached light of the archive. It didn't originate from any visible source. It simply fudiwasu. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only a lingering warmth on my cheek. Hallucination. Oxygen deprivation, the damp. Asterisk I attempted to rationalize it, to apply the logic of the archive to the irrational. My hands trembled slightly as I typed. Click, clack, click, clack. Asterisk the sound felt strained, forced. I glanced at the reflection in the frost, rimed window. My face was pale drawn, the stereo light erasing all definition. The cat was there, too, in the reflection. Its fur the color of old bruises, the single eye burning with an unsettling intensity. It didn't react to my presence, simply watched, its gaze fixed on the dollhouse. I quickly turned my head, but the reflection was gone. The cat, the crimson thread, gone. I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. Seismic activity log level beta. Asterisk the paper felt heavy, the ink blurred. My fingers fumbled with the keys. Click, clack, asterisk the typewriter bell chimed again. A jarring interruption. The crimson thread reappeared, stronger this time, pulsing faintly. It stretched further, reaching towards me, and then abruptly vanished. The dollhouse seemed to hum, a low, almost imperceptible vibration that resonated deep within my bones. I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of sadness, a profound sense of loss for a place and a time I barely remembered. My breath hitched. I reached for the carriage return lever, the clack echoing in the oppressive silence. Then, the dollhouse's front door clicked shut. The sound was precise, mechanical, like a key engaging a tumbler. A distinct, metallic fucklick tea. It wasn't the sound of wood settling. It was the sound of something locking. The frost creeping across the glass was never this thick in Sector 4. My breath fogged the pain in uneven bursts, each exhalation a silent accusation against the cold. The camera shook in my grip, click, clack, the lens fogging even as I adjusted the focus. My fingers leaving smudges on the metal housing, asterisk 1936, Blackwood outpost, reflection study. Asterisk I typed it into the logbook. The keys a mechanical stutter against my frantic pulse. The paper resisted, the ink bleeding like always. But I didn't care. I needed proof. The crimson thread had returned, a thin, unbroken line stretching from the dollhouse toward the window, and this time it didn't vanish. I turned the camera on the glass. Nothing. The reflection of the archive was a hollowed, out shell, the shelves of reports and maps warped into something unrecognizable. No dust motes danced in the distorted light. No shadows clung to the warped edges, just the slow, deliberate front crunchy of snow outside, each grain settling with impossible precision. I leaned closer, the lens pressing against the frost. The camera's viewfinder was a void, a black mirror that swallowed my own face. Then, movement, a flicker. Not in the reflection of the room, but in the glass itself, a shape too smooth to be ice, too deliberate to be wind. My breath hitched, the camera tilting as my fingers slipped. The crunching snow outside slowed, each grain now falling like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. The cat's reflection appeared first in the corner of the lens, its fur not the bruised gray of the real world, but a polished obsidian, drinking in the light like a wound. The single eye, centered, unblinking, fixed on me. Not the reflection of me. Me. I swallowed. The camera's weight dragging my arm down, but I didn't dare look away. The reflection's gaze did follow the camera's movement. It stayed fixed as if the cat itself were turning its head in the unseen world beyond the glass. I fumbled for the shutter button, my thumb pressing down with a foot and click that echoed like a gunshot in the silence. The flashbulb erupted, a white, hot pulse that seared through the frost. The reflection didn't flinch. The cat's eye remained open unnaturally still, even as the flash burned across its face. Then it blinked. Not a reflex, a choice. The lens fogged instantly. My breath fogging faster now, the camera slipping from my grip. The reflection vanished, but the blink lingered in the viewfinder. A single, deliberate twitch, like a switch being thrown in some unseen mechanism. The crunching snow outside resumed, but now it was a chorus, 1,000 grains falling in unison. Each one a whisper against the glass. I didn't turn. I could see the camera's lens was still warm. The image burned into the emulsion. The cat's reflection blinked again, slower this time as if testing the weight of its own eyelids. The crimson thread pulsed from the dollhouse, stretching toward the window like a tether. My fingers trembled over the keys. The flick, clack, now a staccato rhythm. A desperate attempt to fill the silence with something. Anything. Other than the sound of my own breath. The reflection's eye opened, and this time it was looking at me. The report on Fuinchlora Ciboria aeruginosensin. The green mold that bleaches stone was pinned beneath a brass clip, the edges curled from years of humidity. I pried it free, the paper resisting like old skin, and unfolded it over the desk. The ink had faded to a watercolor blue, the diagrams of fungal mycelium spreading across the page like veins. My fingers traced the margins, pausing at the handwritten note in the corner. Asterisk specimen, 7B exhibits unnatural adhesion properties. Asterisk no signature, no date. Just the 40 click of the clip falling onto the desk, rolling once before settling against the leg of the chair. The air smelled of ozone and something older, damp wool perhaps, or the faint metallic tang of blood that never quite dried. I exhaled through my nose, the breath fogging the lens of my glasses. The necklace was there, wedged between the pages, its blackness too absolute, too ferventine against the faded blue. I didn't remember placing it. Didn't remember finding it at all. I lifted it free. The raven skulls were interlocking, each polished to a mirror sheen, the beaks fitted together like gears. My thumb pressed against one, and the cold seeped in, not the numbing chill of ice, but the precise surgical cold of a scalpel's edge. No pores, no texture, just the smooth, unbroken surface of something that had never lived, or if it had been stripped of life in a way that defied decay. The vertebrae of the skulls were fused, the joints welded shut, and yet when I tilted my wrist, the entire necklace sifted deafened, a slow, deliberate rotation, as if the bones were still connected to something unseen. The thrum started in my teeth first, a vibration so deep it wasn't sound at all, just a pressure building behind my molars, a low-frequency hum that resonated in my bones. The clack of my typing stuttered, the keys pressing down with uneven force. The words on the screen blurred for a second, the letters rearranging themselves into a single, jagged line. Asterisk the cat. House. Asterisk I didn't look up. Marlowe was at the window again, his fingers tracing the frost in slow, deliberate arcs, leaving smudges that did melt. His breath came in short, uneven bursts, each one fogging the glass before dissipating like smoke. He hadn't spoken in 12 hours. Not since he started muttering about the cat. Souse, his voice a dry rasp, the words slipping between his lips like a tongue too large for his mouth. Asterisk. The cat's house is waiting. The cat's house is warm. Asterisk the necklace pulsed. Not a twitch. Not a tremor. The skull's scent moved, the vertebrae sliding apart with a sound like dry bones snapping, the interlocking beaks separating with a precision that made my stomach clench. I didn't dare look away from the screen, but I knew. The click, click, clack of my keys was the only thing keeping me from turning. The thrum in my teeth sharpened, the vibration traveling up my spine, and for a second, the room tilted, the walls of the outpost pressing in like the ribs of some great unseen beast. The dollhouse was still there. The miniature version of my home, the one that had appeared overnight, its walls flawless, its windows reflecting nothing. A crimson thread pulsed from its roof, stretching toward the window where Marlowe stood, his back rigid, his fingers still drawing shapes in the frost. The necklace's skulls clicked back into place, the thrum fading to a whisper, but the vibration lingered, a ghost in my limbs. I exhaled. The air smelled like mold now. Like the fungal diagrams on the report, spreading, consuming, turning everything it touched into something smooth and unyielding. The necklace was warm, not hot, not cold. Just warm, moored as if it had been sitting in sunlight, absorbing the heat, holding it close. My fingers curled around the base, the vertebrae pressing into my palm, and for the first time I saw the mark, a single, centered eye. Not an eye. A phyllens, polished obsidian, perfectly round, set into the forehead of the largest skull. It wasn't T part of the necklace. It was Sumbi looking at me. I didn't T scream. I didn't move. The big click of the keys stopped. The thrum stopped. And then, the skulls shifted again. Not a rotation, not a slide. They twitched, the vertebrae snapping back into alignment with a sound like 1,000 dry bones settling into place at once. The eye, no, the photo-lens, winked. And when I looked away, the air had thickened, not with cold, though the outpost remained stubbornly frigid, but with a pressure, a density that clung to my lungs like damp wool. The crimson thread from the dollhouse pulsed, a slow, deliberate beat against the frosted window, mirroring the tremor in my hand as I gripped the necklace. Marlowe hadn't moved. He remained a statue at the window, his breath fogging the glass in silent, rhythmic bursts. The other Stin Davies Chentween stood motionless in the periphery, their faces blank, their eyes vacant. The typing had become a frantic rhythm. Clack, click, clack. The keys hammered against the worn metal of the typewriter, each strike a desperate counterpoint to the oppressive stillness of the outpost. My fingers moved almost independently, driven by a compulsion I couldn't comprehend. The words appeared on the screen, stark white against the faded blue. Run. I didn't look up. Not yet. The necklace felt heavier now, the vertebrae pressing into my palm with an almost painful insistence. The obsidian lens pulsed with a faint internal light, a cold, unwavering gaze fixed on something beyond my perception. I focused on the mechanics of the typewriter, the satisfying funding clack of each key engaging a tumbler mechanism, a futile attempt to ground myself in the tangible. The metallic tang of blood, faint but persistent, seemed to intensify, coating the back of my throat. Then I saw it. At the end of the corridor, where the shadows should have pooled, where the darkness should have offered some small respite from the oppressive glare of the perpetual twilight, there was nothing. And yet, something was there. A figure tall, impossibly still, formed of what appeared to be polished black stone. It didn't cast a shadow. It was the absence of shadow. The void made manifest. The silence deepened. Not a natural silence, the hush of falling snow, or the stillness of a frozen lake. This was a silence imposed dead, a vacuum that sucked the sound from the air, leaving only the frantic thivin click-clack of the typewriter as a desperate, fragile echo. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the lack of sound. I risked a glance at the others. Their eyes, they were wrong. Dull, lifeless, reflecting the crimson thread from the dollhouse like polished obsidian. They weren't looking at me. They weren't looking at anything. They were simply the puppets animated by some unseen force. The figure in the corridor didn't move, it didn't breathe. It didn't hide existed in the conventional sense. It was a negation, a hole punched in reality. And yet, it was undeniably fidifidifident. The polished surface of its form reflected nothing, absorbing all light, all warmth, all life. It was the absence of everything I understood about the world. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence. The thrum in my teeth returned, a low, insistent vibration that threatened to shatter my skull. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it away, clinging to the memory of warmth of sunlight, of Twin Sondi. But the image of the stone figure remained, burned into the back of my eyelids. I opened my eyes. The figure hadn't moved. It remained at the end of the corridor, an unblinking sentinel in the void. And then, almost imperceptibly, its head tilted. A slow, deliberate movement, devoid of any natural fluidity. It wasn't looking fluke-eyed me, not precisely. It was looking through me, assessing, cataloging. The crimson thread pulsed faster now, a frantic heartbeat mirroring my own. The necklace grew colder, the vertebrae biting into my palm. I wanted to drop it, to fling it away, but my fingers were frozen, locked in place. The figure's foot lifted. No sound, not a creak, not a scrape, not a whisper. Just the silent, inexorable movement of polished stone against the frozen floor. It was an act of defiance, a declaration of dominance. And as it lifted, the click-clack of the typewriter abruptly ceased. The air tasted like static, like licking a 9-volt battery. I hadn't realized I'd stopped breathing until the sudden sharp intake of air rattled in my chest. Dr. Aris stood before me, his face a sickly parchment stretched taut over bone. The crimson thread, that obscene scarlet filament, pulsed visibly against his pallid skin, mirroring the frantic beat of my own pulse. His eyes, once sharp and analytical, were now vacant pools, reflecting the dollhouse's crimson glow. "The cat's house," he intoned, his voice a monotone drone that scraped against my nerves. "The thread of memory." The words were devoid of inflection, delivered with the precision of a machine reciting a programmed phrase. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his frame, a subtle vibration that resonated within the oppressive silence. The metallic tang of blood, ever present, intensified, clinging to the back of my throat like a physical weight. My hand trembled as I approached the typewriter. The obsidian lens of the necklace pressed into my palm, a cold, insistent pressure. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat, strangled by a rising tide of dread. The click-clack of the keys seemed to mock my paralysis. I focused on the mechanics, the precise engagement of each tumbler, a desperate attempt to anchor myself to something tangible. The faint scent of ozone, sharp and acrid, filled the air. I typed. "What does that mean?" The keys moved. Not under my direction. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but undeniable. My fingers remained still, hovering above the keyboard, while the machine executed its own silent command. Click-clack-clack-clack. The letters appeared on the screen, stark and accusatory. The thread burns. The words resonated within me, a chilling confirmation of a fear I hadn't dared to articulate. The crimson thread wasn't merely a visual anomaly. It was a conduit, a pathway for something else. The thrum in my teeth intensified, a low, insistent vibration that threatened to shatter my skull. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the rising panic. The image of the stone figure, its polished surface reflecting nothing, swam behind my eyelids. I opened my eyes. Aris hadn't reacted to the typed message. He remained motionless, a puppet animated by an unseen force. The crimson thread pulsed, a slow, deliberate beat against the frosted window, mirroring the tremor in my hand. I risked a glance at the window, and that's when I saw it. The stone construct. It stood in the reflection behind Aris, impossibly tall, impossibly still. It didn't cast a shadow, an absence of shadow where shadow should be. But here is the anomaly. It moved. The reflection tilted its head, a slow, deliberate gesture that didn't match Aris's posture. The reflection's movement was independent, a mocking imitation of life. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. The metallic rasp of fur, faint but distinct, brushed against my ear. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence. The obsidian lens pulsed with a cold, unwavering light, boring into my soul. I wanted to scream, to shatter the oppressive stillness, but the sound died in my throat, a strangled gasp. The scent of ozone intensified, stinging my nostrils. Then, abruptly, the click-clack ceased. The typewriter fell silent, the sudden absence of sound more jarring than any noise. A vacuum formed in the air, a palpable void that seemed to suck the very life from the room. The crimson thread pulsed faster, a frantic heartbeat mirroring my own. A single, definitive sound. Then, a second, far too loud, echoing through the outpost like a gunshot. Clunk. The reverberation lingered, a metallic tremor that vibrated through the floorboards and into my bones. The world seemed to tilt, the edges blurring, the boundaries dissolving. The scent of ozone became overwhelming, choking me. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively clutching the necklace, the cold obsidian biting into my palm. The stone figure in the reflection remained, its polished surface unreadable, its presence a silent, unwavering threat. The panel was flush with the wall, a seam so faint it might have been imagined, until my fingers traced the cold, uneven edge. The metal groaned under pressure, a slow, deliberate protest, like a rusted hinge unyielding to time. A wedge of darkness yawned open, revealing not the sterile corridors beyond, but a cavern of bioluminescence. The air within the recess exhaled a damp, earthy scent thick with the musk of decay and something else. Something sweet, cloying like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. The fungal blooms pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves, their petals unfurling in shades of ochre and sickly green, veins of crimson threading through their centers, matching the thread that coiled from my wrist. My breath fogged the space, a fleeting disturbance in the oppressive stillness. The hum began then, a low, resonant thrum, like the vibration of a struck tuning fork, only deeper, more organic. It reverberated through my bones, syncing with the throb of the crimson filaments. I swallowed hard, the movement forcing the words from my throat. Subconscious. The realization settled like a stone in my gut. This wasn't an outpost. It was a cartography of my own fractured mind. The Dust Bowl not a historical event, but the parched, screaming wound of my childhood. The photos were arranged in neat, meticulous rows, their edges yellowed with age, their surfaces slick with moisture. My hands trembled as I reached for the first a snapshot of my mother's laughter, her teeth too white against the sepia tones. But the caption beneath had been rewritten in precise looping script. The dollhouse is a womb. The cat is the key. The ink glowed faintly, as if freshly applied. I flicked my wrist, and the obsidian lens of the necklace flared, casting jagged shadows across the fungal growths. They recoiled ever so slightly, their petals contracting like muscle. The second photo showed me at 7, standing in the doorway of our home, my small frame dwarfed by the threshold. The original caption read, "First snowfall." Now it read, "Far the thread burns when you lie." My pulse spiked. The fungal blooms pulsed in response, their crimson veins throbbing in time with my heartbeat. The hum deepened, a mournful dirge that seemed to vibrate the very air. I reached for the third photo, a close-up of my mother's hands, fingers intertwined with mine. The caption had been scrawled over in the same precise script. "To when she was the thread, you cut it." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. My fingers hovered over the image, the fungal tendrils stretching toward my skin like exploratory fingers. The hum swelled, a chorus of voices whispering just beyond comprehension. Then the tendril touched my palm. It was warm, almost alive, its texture slick and velvety, like the inside of a mushroom cap. The crimson light flared, a sudden blinding pulse that seared through my veins. The photos blurred, their edges warping, the fungal blooms expanding in a rapid, unnatural growth. The hum became a shriek, a high-pitched wail that split the air, and the stone figure from the reflection stepped forward, its polished surface gleaming, its single, hollow eye fixed on me. The cat's reflection loomed behind it, its single forehead eye blinking slowly, deliberately, as if in warning. The tendril coiled around my wrist, tightening with a slow, inexorable pressure. The crimson thread pulsed in time with the fungal bloom's heartbeat, and the world tilted, the edges of my vision darkening. The last thing I saw was my mother's face, not in the photo, but in the stone construct's polished surface, a ghost of memory, her lips moving in silent scream. The reflections multiplied, not just in the polished surface of the stone construct, but in the slick, undulating caps of the fungal blooms, in the fractured planes of the ice clinging to the cavern walls. Each iteration of the cat was sharper, more defined 2D. The single eye, a pinpoint of obsidian light, seemed to bore into me. It wasn't a trick of the light, the reflections had been moved with an unsettling fluidity, their gaze tracking my every motion. My skin prickled, a sensation like static electricity building beneath the surface. I glanced down at my forearm, and a faint luminescence pulsed beneath the skin, a network of pale, sickly green veins mirroring the fungal blooms above. The typewriter's keys clicked with a frantic rhythm, a mechanical counterpoint to the throbbing hum that saturated the air. But it wasn't just the keys. Within the fortic clack-clack of the mechanism, I heard whispers, subvocal, layered, indistinct, yet undeniably present. Fragments of phrases snatched from the ether, falling the snow so cold. My breath hitched. Those weren't random sounds, they were echoes, distorted remnants of memory. My mother's voice. I forced myself to type, the action a desperate attempt to anchor myself to some semblance of control. The obsidian lens of the necklace flared, casting elongated, grotesque shadows that danced across the fungal blooms. The stone construct remained motionless, its hollow eye fixed on me, radiating a palpable fitch quality that seeped through the floorboards, chilling me to the bone. It wasn't just a temperature change, it was a draining, a leaching of warmth and vitality. The hum intensified, a pressure against my temples. The cat's reflection in the stone construct's surface rippled, the single eye momentarily widening, as if in surprise. Then I saw it 40-40 a flicker, in my own eye socket, reflected in the polished surface of the construct. the cat's eye staring back at me. A jolt of disorientation slammed through me. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the light? Or something else? I typed T-Wine Mother. The carriage return echoed, a hollow, mournful clang in the cavernous space. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a fragmented, almost intelligible phrase. The roses wilted. My fingers fumbled with the keys, the mechanical resistance a frustrating barrier against the rising tide of panic. The fungal blooms pulsed, their crimson veins throbbing in time with my heartbeat. The cold intensified, a creeping numbness spreading through my limbs. The stone construct didn't move, but I felt its presence shift, a subtle alteration in the atmosphere that sent a wave of nausea through me. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices lamenting a loss I couldn't quite grasp. The thread. Broken. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the voices to cease, the cold to recede, but it was no use. The world was closing in, the boundaries between reality and memory blurring into a terrifying, indistinguishable mass. Then I felt it, a tugging sensation on my arm, a gentle but persistent pull. I opened my eyes and saw Tendi, the fungal bloom on my forearm, the one closest to the crimson thread coiled around my wrist, fissure moving. It wasn't just pulsing, it was reaching, its tendrils extending, probing as if searching for something. The skin beneath the bloom began to stretch, to distort, the pale green luminescence intensifying. A line appeared, a hairline fracture in the skin, and then another. The crimson thread, previously invisible beneath the surface, began to push through, a vibrant, pulsing vein of light. The whispers reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of lamentations and warnings. It's coming, it's coming. The fungal bloom pulled temp, the corridor stretched before me, a labyrinth of whitewashed wood and fungal veins pulsing like slow, crimson veins beneath the surface. The air smelled of mildew and something older, something that clung to the back of my throat, a scent I couldn't place, though it sent a jolt of recognition through my chest. My fingers traced the wallpaper, the texture rough beneath my fingertips, as if the walls themselves were breathing. The absence of shadows was unsettling, the light too bright, too clean twinchin, as though it had been scrubbed of any imperfection, any hint of darkness. The dollhouse loomed ahead, its miniature proportions warped into something vast, its windows glowing with a sickly crimson hue. The threads those crimson strands wove through the air, connecting every surface, every object, every person. They hummed faintly, a vibration against my skin. I followed one with my eyes, tracing its path from the stone construct's outstretched hand to the dollhouse door, then to the fungal blooms clinging to the walls. The threads pulsed in time with my heartbeat, a rhythm I couldn't escape. The pages in my head turned with a dry, rapid snap, 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 each one revealing fragments of memory I hadn't thought of in years. My mother's voice, soft and distant, "Raymond, don't go near the cat." The words echoed, layered over the mechanical click of the typewriter, the distant drip of water from the cavern's ceiling. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The dollhouse door was ajar. I stepped closer, the wood beneath my boots warped, the grain twisted into something unnatural. The reflection in the window wasn't mine, it was younger, smaller, my childhood self standing in the same spot, fingers outstretched toward the cat. The single obsidian eye gleamed in the reflection, unblinking, watching. The stone construct stood before the dollhouse, its polished surface now reflecting not the room, but my face twisted, my mouth stretched in a silent scream. The pages in my head turned faster, the sound like a storm inside my skull. The roses wilted, the thread broke. My younger self reached for the cat, and in the reflection the creature's tail lashed, the fur bristling with a metallic rasp. The crimson threads in the air tightened, pulling at my wrists, my ankles, as if they were real, as if they were fine holding me. The dollhouse door creaked open, silent. No hinge sound, no draft to disturb the stillness. Just the door swinging inward on its own, revealing the interior a miniature version of the outpost. But wrong, distorted, the walls too close. And there, in the center of the dollhouse, stood the cat. Its single eye was fixed on me, unblinking, the obsidian pupil reflecting the crimson glow of the windows. The pages in my head turned one last time, the sound deafening, and then the cat's mouth opened. I stand frozen, the realization creeping over me like a chill. Escape is impossible. The outpost isn't a physical place, but a map of my own subconscious, every twisted corridor and chamber a reflection of my repressed trauma. The cat, the stone construct, the dollhouse, and those crimson threads are all facets of my own fractured mind. My gaze falls upon the typewriter, its metal body seeming to loom over me like an accusation. I reach out, my fingers closing around the keys as if they might offer some solace, but there is none to be found. With a jerky motion, I yank the paper from the roller, letting it flutter to the floor. The sound is almost deafening in its silence, just a soft whoosh of air as the page floats down. My hands move with a mind of their own, gathering up scraps of paper and shoving them into the typewriter's maw. I strike a match, the flame casting flickering shadows on the walls as it dances across the dry wood. The click-clack of the keys gives way to a crackle as the flames engulf the machine. The fire spreads with an unnerving rapidity, consuming the fungal blooms that cling to the walls like grasping fingers. They shrivel and blacken, releasing a noxious cloud of spores into the air. I watch, detached, as the dollhouse is consumed by the inferno, its miniature rooms collapsing in on themselves like a dying breath. The flames cast eerie silhouettes on the ice window behind it, making it seem as though the very darkness itself was moving, twisting. And then, through the shattered remains of the glass, I see it, the cat's reflection staring back at me with an unblinking gaze. Its single eye seems to burn with an inner fire, reflecting the flames that devour everything around us. For a moment our gazes lock, mine and this spectre from my own mind. Then, in a movement so slight I might have imagined it, the cat's reflection winks. The ice window shatters, its fragments crashing down like 1,000 tiny knives slicing through the air. The sound is almost musical, a crystalline tinkle that gives way to an oppressive silence. As I step out into the snow, the wasteland stretches before me, endless and unbroken. The only sound is the soft crunch of my boots in the frozen crystals. My mind still echoes with the typewriter's final note, burned into my brain like a branding iron click-clack-crackle silence. It is as though I've left something essential behind, abandoned it to burn alongside the dollhouse and those twisted threads. But even that is just an illusion. There was never anything physical to leave behind. I begin to walk, the snow swallowing my footsteps like a shroud. The only constant in this desolate landscape seems to be me, Raymond Kramer, archivist of horrors. As I trudge forward, something catches my attention, a faint scratching sound that grows louder with each step. Keys clicking from within the snow itself. At first, it is almost imperceptible, just a gentle susurration, like the rustling of dry leaves. But then it builds in intensity, becoming more insistent, until I can feel the vibrations through my boots. Tappity-tap-click, whir, key turning in lock. The sound reverberates up from beneath the snow's surface as if something is typing out a message, or perhaps unlocking some hidden door.